The fact is that Yamuna, as Yami, is the sister of the god of who became the god of death, the father of Yudhishthir, but also the god of justice, of Dharma. So there is a deep connection, as I said, between the Yamuna and the law of nature and the law of society. Under the rule of so-called utilitarian materialistic science, for many centuries, people, especially in the West, had given up on the notion of the sacredness or the life of elements, including the fact that a river was also a living being and could be called a goddess or a devi. The symbol of Yamuna as a sister of Yama tells us is that just like Yama is the god of death, Yami has now entered a stage perilously close to death, and therefore saving her is a sacred duty. It's part of the Dharma, and I think we should invoke Yama as the king of Dharma, as the god of Dharma, to help restore the river. Namaskar, Om Gurubhyo Namaha. I will have the task of presenting some aspects of the Yamuna's significance and relevance in three parts, following and referring to my predecessors. I would first like to, of course, thank and acknowledge Srimati Mishra for her tireless work on behalf of Bharatiya Sanskriti, and particularly the natural and archaeological heritage. And I would also like to express my pleasure at being back at the IIT Delhi when my father and I first visited and actually stayed in the guest house and gave some lectures back in 1980, I think. It was either 1980 or 1979, so it goes back a long time. I would then like to divide what I'm going to say into three parts, because with all the scholars present in the room, I would not pretend to teach anything new about either the history or the etymology of Yamuna, or neither about its current condition and about what needs to be done to heal it, to not only improve it, but to actually purify it. But what I will present will be more of a synthetic outline of the worldwide relevance of the Yamuna's history, its current condition, and what can be done about it. So the first part will be a few reflections on the origins of the Yamuna as a river and as a symbol. And as has been said before, there is of course that birth of the Yamuna at Yamunotri, but even further up at the Champasar Lake, and its descent. And right from, in some of the earlier texts, we see that it is seen as the daughter of the sun god, Kalinda and Surya. And that in itself sets a sort of a distinction with the Ganga, which is, essentially Shivaji's creation, Lord Shiva's creation. And I see we can perhaps notice a slight difference in terms of as it were, the symbolic character of the two rivers, because Ganga is definitely the river of the spiritual awakening, the spiritual development, and Yamuna has a much more, if I might say so, social and political connection. It is connected to Surya, it is connected to Lord Manu, the first man, it's connected to Yama, her twin brother, and not by chance, the political capital of India has been for many centuries located on the Yamuna, whereas you find Varanasi on the Ganga. Now, the fact that Yamuna is Yami, and she's a twin of Ganga. However, the interesting thing about the word twin, Yam, which you find also in Latin as gem, which gives Gemini, and then you find it in most of the Indo-European languages. The fact is that Yamuna as Yami is the sister of the god of who became the god of death, the father of Yudhishthir, but also the god of justice, of Dharma. So there is a deep connection, as I said, between the Yamuna and the law of nature and the law of society. And then if you look at the common references to Yamuna in the Indo-European world, the most obvious parallel is in Iran, because in Iran you have Yam or Jam, who plays a very important role right at the source of Iranian civilization. In fact, he is first seen basically as the first man, just like Yama is sometimes seen as the first man. You know, sometimes there is some kind of confusion between Yama and Manu. Now, in the case of Iran, Yam was replaced later by Gayomart in later Mazdean cosmology or cosmogony. But the fact is that originally Yam was the lawgiver. Then later on he was made as the fourth king of the Pishdadi dynasty, which is regarded as mythological. But the very interesting about Yam is that he was essentially the king of paradise. And when he was warned about a great flood by Ahura Mazda, then he built a very large underground kingdom, cavern, where he took samples of every living creature on Earth, and he kept them in what you might call an artificial world, protected and sheltered from the flood. So you see the connection with the flood legend, and you also see the connection of the Yam root with the flood in Scandinavia, where there is a giant called Ymir, and the root is considered to be the same. And it's out of the bones of that dismembered giant that the world is born. And you find the dismemberment of the Purusha in many traditions in India as well. Now, many people are saying, so Yam is borrowed from Iran, you know, and then that's far from clear, because the connection between Yama and Yami in India is very obvious, both geographically and in terms of the associated traditions. Whereas in Iran, there was clearly no role for Yami. So Yam remains as a single, as a sole character, and you lose track of Yami and Yima-Ksheta, as he is generally called, Yima the Shining, is also the son of the sun, by the way, so there you see the common filiation. And this Yima has a cup, which is called, of course, Jam's cup, and that cup in which the first wine is supposed to have been brewed, and I think you have here a reference to the Soma as well. But the fact is that this cup has 7 rings, and out of this cup, Yama can see the entire past, present, and future. He has got a view of everything that has ever happened and will happen anywhere. So that in itself connects to water, which in Iran, the connection with water has become quite faint, simply because Iran doesn't have a lot of water. I mean, rivers are small and few. Therefore, the whole idea of the flood myth and the river has gradually I would say, become less and less relevant, and you are left with Yama as the king of the dead, but also as the king of paradise and as the one who gives immortality, because he has achieved it. He was the first mortal who became immortal, which is also the case of Yama according to the Upanishads. So that sets the stage, and therefore I would like to say that the meaning of Yamuna or Yami being the sister of Yama is not only a matter of a parallelism between two rivers, but it also has something to do with a much more metaphysical concept of water and the role of the river as a giver of life and as a giver of immortality. And here I will briefly touch upon something which has become very relevant in today's scientific research, because under the rule of so-called utilitarian materialistic science for many centuries, people, especially in the West, had given up on the notion of the sacredness or the life of elements, including the fact that a river was also a living being and could be called a goddess or a devi. Water was simply some chemical mix that you could drink and that you could use for all sorts of industrial uses. And therefore, it had lost any kind of introspective value. Whereas now we know that water is first a very strange compound, because according to the pure laws of physics and chemistry, it probably should not exist as a stable element. So there is a particular force that has led to the binding of the elements, you know, oxygen and hydrogen, which have made water what it is, and which have made water essentially a border between the material and the gaseous, and also, of course, as a liquid, But also now we are discovering there is a deeper connection with what we call the zero-point field. In other words, the field where everything is potential. And water seems to be that border. I'm talking about quantum physics now, because of the way it reacts. And we have been able to verify increasingly what some of the pioneers of water research, such as the Japanese Emoto and the French Benveniste, were able to show that water is alive, it has a memory, it is able to react to emotions, and it does keep the impressions that it gets not only from material elements, but from mental influences. And that's why we can see, for example, that if you put certain chemicals in water, naturally the water molecules will get deformed, and if you freeze them into ice, you will see the ice crystals will also be deformed and unharmonious, and it will take the capacity of water to regenerate itself to become pure again and to recover its natural symmetry. Now, this has led to very interesting and deep studies into, how mathematical laws can affect and transform water, particularly referring to what we call the Fourier transforms. The Fourier transforms in operation, which scientists are familiar with, which basically means that you can measure something according to a particular law of its behavior, and by applying the Fourier transform, you turn it into something else. And for example, we have been able to show that water exists in the liquid form at a certain rate of vibration, which corresponds to a particular Hertzian frequency. And that Hertzian frequency, which you can use in music, you can use it as a diapason, as a tune, would be in the range. It's actually 429.55 hertz. Now, this is something which I won't go into detail, but it shows that there is a definite connection between the human psychobiological and general physical condition, not only for humans but for all living beings, and water, and electromagnetic realm, the electromagnetic range of frequencies. So all that gives us a completely different understanding of the role of water and the role of rivers. Rivers have been very badly treated in the last 200 years, even perhaps less. But you just have to read the book by the late Edward Goldsmith called The Environmental Effect of Large Dams, which was published sometime in 1970s, I think. Or you have to read more specifically David Haberman's book on the Yamuna. And you see how much rivers were mistreated, as Honorable Minister Shekhawat said, by engineers who were only interested in drawing something out of water, whether it was power or irrigation. And how, as a result, rivers have been literally murdered, or at least very badly maimed. And this is clearly the case of the great rivers of the world, and particularly, I would say, among them, the Yamuna is one of the most grievously affected, because we have just considered it as a source of what people need for agriculture, industry, and including sewage. And as a result, there has to be a complete transformation of the attitude to rivers. For example, I remember some years ago, Neeraj hosted a conference at the National Stadium where a scientist spoke in a very interesting way about how the water and the earth are totally intermingled. And when you dam a river, or when you put it into a canal, basically you are killing part of the river. Because the river is not only tied to the atmosphere, but it is also tied to the earth, to the land in which it flows. So it needs to have its freedom to move. It's a living being. You cannot sort of channel it, control it beyond a point. And we all know that channels get silted. By the way, this is what happened at the Wazirabad barrage, which definitely needs to be desilted. That's one of the top requirements now. But the fact is that when you don't take into account that the river is not only liquid flowing through solid land, it's also the atmosphere, the stream of atmosphere that goes throughout the course, but above it, because it's intimately mixed with the water vapor that exudes from the river. And that's why you have this ecosystem which has been called the fourth state of water. That has been now confirmed. There is something called the state of water, which is neither liquid, gaseous, nor icy, solid, but it exists in a different plane, and this may be the reason why there is still a Saraswati River, which may only subsist in the fourth kind of water. By the way, now we are talking about the fact that every element in nature is existing in 7 states. And water, we have discovered 4 states. There probably are 3 more, but right now we are at the 4th. And you just had to hear Satya Nadella talking a few weeks ago about how they had discovered a 5th state of matter, which he called... but the fact is that we have to look holistically at water, we have to look holistically at rivers, and I think that what the symbol of Yamuna as a sister of Yama tells us is that just like Yama is a god of death, Yami has now entered a stage perilously close to death, and therefore saving her is a sacred duty. It's part of the Dharma, and I think we should invoke Yama as a king of Dharma, as a god of Dharma, to help restore the river. There are now many proposals, plans, and also resolutions made. It won't be easy, because you have to look from top to bottom at all the industrial and socio-structural sort of development that has taken place, and you have to reconsider it as much as you can and see how long it takes you to do something which is viable in terms of social acceptance, social acceptability, and economic viability. But let's at least start in that, and let's take that direction and see how we can make it happen. And therefore, I would like to say that we should now recover the full Vedic significance of the Yamuna. Not too long ago, there was a scientific paper claiming that the origin of Indo-European civilization is in a clan situated somewhere in Ukraine called Yamnaya. We don't know if there is an etymological connection between Yamnaya and Yamuna, and also the story of there being the origin of Indo-European civilization seems untenable, but they certainly played a role in spreading it in certain parts of Eastern and Central Europe. So the universal appeal and significance of Yamuna, there is also a Yamuna flowing in Bangladesh, as we all know, on the east, and that is something which should inspire us. Namaskar and thank you.